Yes. We're running?
You're right.
Okay. Good evening. It is now 6 o'clock on November 13th. We do not have a quorum, so I'm suggesting we pause. I'm suggesting we pause for recess for 20 minutes.
Okay.
To see if we get a quorum.
Do we want to maybe shorten that in case we get somebody first and then can we
Yeah.
go on recess again later, like
Yeah.
if we don't?
Yes,
Yeah.
right,
So
right.
Why don't we
Yeah, well,
start with 10? Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll start with 10 minutes.
okay, fine. We'll have a 10-minute recess to see if we can get a quorum.
Okay, you're talking 10 minutes from 6 o'clock or 10 minutes from now, because it's 6:02.
From 6,
Tell us, so you want us to be back at 6:10 PM?
correct?
Come back at 6:10.
Yeah.
We still do not have a quorum.
Yeah, we
Yes, we
did.
did.
Yeah,
Oh.
we did.
I'm
1, 2, 3.
sorry.
Right.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, we do have a quorum, so we can start the meeting. So I'd like to call to order and have us rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have some comments under the chairperson's section on the opening procedure. I have 5. Carolyn Castillo, who is the president of the CABOC. She was here last time when we had to adjourn because lack of a quorum. And she was going to give us a talk on their academy, their training courses, and she was going to use the example of when she's creating for the site inspections. She didn't get to do that last time. She called me yesterday and said that she had a conflict. She couldn't make it tonight, but she's very willing to come back any other time. And she also volunteered to help the first ad hoc committee that's going to do a site inspection in getting to be able to do it. So we'll see her later. Second one is, as I think all of you know, John Anderson resigned this week. He was an alternate on the county civil grand jury, and evidently someone juror backed out, so he had to take over. So he resigned. He was our secretary, and he had been president for a couple years. The third one is when one door closes, another opens. He lost Anton because of health, and he was a wealth of knowledge. Well, Don has applied, and he has been appointed to the committee. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of Don's background from the resume he had submitted. He's lived in Richmond, or in our district, for over 55 years. He went to Kennedy High School and at UC Berkeley. He worked in heavy construction for 53 years and was in the senior management in construction companies, including 17 years at Bechtel. So he has a full knowledge of construction. He, like Anton, loves CBOC. He has been involved in the CBOC for 55 years with the school district in one way or another. He is in the, we used to have where you could only have 2 consecutive terms, and you had to be termed out. They changed the law, but he came under that. He did his 2 terms. He was termed out, then he came back and he did 3 terms, and that was legal. And he was termed out again. He waited 2 years and he's back again. So he's a love of it. And he has been the chairman of this committee. He's been the co-chair of the audit subcommittee, chair of the bylaws, and chair of the website committee. So his knowledge is invaluable to us. Also, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that he's a recognized expert in the field of industrial safety. So I would just like to welcome Don and glad to have you aboard.
Thank you.
The fourth thing is we do not have a secretary. John Anderson was the secretary, so Ariel has said she would do the minutes for tonight. And next month we will be having elections, and we will pick a secretary then.
Are you gonna report about Tamisha?
Yes, I think Tamisha has also resigned, so we've lost a bad couple months. We lost Anton, Tamisha, and John in just 2 months' time. And she had personal conflicts and had trouble with making the commitment, so she resigned. The final thing I'd like to do is hand out. Remember back in July, I gave a report on the status of the CBO. And at that time, the committee voted to send it to various people and to various, we sent it to the board, of course, and the superintendent. We sent it to Ed Source, in a press release, to Contra Costa Times press release. We sent it to the cocoa tax, and we sent it to California tax, Cal tax. And we tried to send it to the PTAs, but we never wound up getting that database. So just this week, I got a draft letter from the cocoa tax. And I'd just like to hand this out. This is a draft. They may or may not send it, but I want to give you a heads up. No, one page. Thank you, Erin. This is addressed to the superintendent, and it is copied to the trustees and also to me. And it's from Jack Weir, who is the director of the Contra Costa Taxpayers Association. And it's dealing with the district non-compliance to the Proposition 39 School Bond Act. And I'd like to introduce Jack Weir, sitting over here. Does anybody not know Jack Weir? Anyway, Jack has been involved in CABOC and cocoa tax, and for 40 years he's been involved in the area. So he was on the Pleasant Hill. He started Pleasant Hill Taxpayers Association. He started the Cal BOC and the California BOC. So he has had several years in the business. So anyway, I wanted to give this out. They may not send it, but it's just a heads up for you. The next thing, we need to take attendance. Ariel,
Public comment on your report.
oh, sure.
When you sent this out,
You don't remember the public anymore. Sorry, only remember the can comment, otherwise,
On the chairperson.
yeah, otherwise we need to make
Oh,
put the
agenda
letter,
item.
put
Yeah,
the letter on as an agenda
yeah,
item.
no, this is just for information.
Sorry.
because we can't even ask questions about what she said, so I want to make sure that goes in the record. We're not allowed to ask questions about reports.
Just take it down and take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, to take care of it, I hope the hell of it, take care of it, doesn't mean we're just going to cross
That
it
would
off.
not go in the minutes. This is a Brown Act issue, so
Okay,
it. We cannot talk about anything that we don't put on the agenda, that we don't warn the public that we're going to do.
Mhm.
So reports and all that, if there's a brief question, just like regular public comment. But remember, once you're a voting member, you're no longer a member of the public.
All right, so, and we didn't have time to put it on the agenda.
Madam Chair, point of order.
I'm sorry,
I assume the agenda has a section for public comment.
yes, it's.
But she says that we're not the public, so we're not allowed to speak.
I'm the public.
She's saying that.
Yeah,
That is correct.
but that comes after roll.
And section of the agenda, I will be happy to.
Oh, okay, fine,
And answer any questions associated with that letter which I wrote.
very good. Okay, thank you, Jen. Ariel, will you take attendance, please? You just call the name of the people.
Okay. Chairperson Lauren Hills,
Present,
Vice Chairperson Brandon, Governor Downton,
Present.
Ariel C. Present, Down,
Yes, I'm here.
and Jacques is absent, so we mark that down. All right, we have a quorum. This is the time for public comment. The public can address the committee on bond program issues not already appearing on the agenda. It's limited usually to 3 minutes per speaker, 10 minutes per topic. Later, once we get into the agenda, public can comment on any item on the agenda for 2 minutes per speaker. Is there any public comment? Yes.
You don't mind, I'm gonna move to the big kid table.
Sure.
Coming from throat surgery and the voice is a little raspy. So I've always wanted to sit close to Don. My name is Jack Weir. I am on the board of directors of the Contra Costa Taxpayers Association. I'm the former president, former executive director. And I'm the co-founder of the California Association of Bond Oversight Committees, along with my good buddy Anton Young here, with whom I spoke earlier this evening. I drafted this letter. The Coco Tax president is in France currently, but I shared this letter with him and we are going to send it. And given the limited amount of time available to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after I get my 3-minute shot. I have a long association with West Contra Costa Unified. I was on the leadership of Coco Tax back when we pushed a previous board to authorize a forensic audit of the district's bond program, and the forensic auditor opined that there was high likelihood of significant financial fraud, waste, and abuse. He had only sampled about 11% of the records that were available, and those of you who around him who may remember those days may remember that the company that had the contract for managing the bond program refused to turn over records to the forensic auditor. Unfortunately, the board decided not to take the remedies or the corrective remedies that were recommended by the forensic auditor, which is very unfortunate. So I have some background. So here are the main points that my letter intends to cover. Fundamentally, the district is not in compliance with Prop 39 and in several respects. I don't know how familiar you are with Prop 39, but back in 2000, when Prop 39 was passed, we taxpayer advocates lobbied very hard that in return for lowering the voter threshold from 2/3 to 55%, that there be a provision in the law that required any district using Prop 39, they must establish and support an independent citizen bond oversight committee. And that's what I'm all about. Among the requirements of Prop 39 are that there be certain specific representatives of a cross-section of the community, including a taxpayer advocate, a senior, a business person, a parent, teacher, and so forth. There have been a number of times in this bond oversight committee's experience when we did not have those required seats on the committee. That disqualifies. That's non-compliance with Prop 39. In addition, back when the bylaws, Don may remember this, were created for this committee, the district determined that there would be 11 members. That's far more than most districts established. And I believe the intent, this is just my personal belief, I believe the intent of having such a large bond oversight committee was so that the district could appoint its own people. We had a very difficult time in those days. So my time's up. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. We are going to send a letter.
Okay. Is there anybody, is there any objections to extending the public comment time by 5 minutes?
Okay. For this individual?
Yeah.
I've checked, just a matter of principle.
Okay. Well, you want to take a vote?
So that was, you're assuming a motion, if you want.
Someone's gonna make a
Someone's
motion.
gotta make the actual motion now, and then we would.
Okay, if
we
anyone
would
wants
take
to make a
vote on
motion to extend the
extending.
time, speak now.
We also have another public comment online.
Oh,
Great.
okay.
I'll make a motion to extend
All right,
the public comment by
all right.
Per person.
for if individual. Is that
Just as individual for an additional 5 minutes?
For additional 5 minutes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay. Do we have, do you want to vote on this?
So,
Point of order, it's actually your call as the chair of the committee. If you want to extend public comment, you have the ability to do that.
But let's do it this way.
what is it?
Brendan?
Aye.
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 Nay.
No, okay. So the ayes have it, we'll send comment on this.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this brief. What we would like to do, and I noticed, I did read the report that Ray wrote. And I agree that it's very important that this committee have an opportunity to reach out to the superintendent and the trustees to share with them and make sure they understand the difficulties and the obstacles that this committee has faced in trying to do its job. I'm going to ask, as a representative of Cocoa Tax, I'm going to ask to meet with the superintendent also. And should you have an opportunity to speak to the Board of Education, I'd be very happy to come along and listen to that. The other thing I want to say that this is not the first time a district has had trouble staying in compliance with Prop 39. And based on my own prior experience, if the district doesn't correct these deficiencies and bring itself into compliance with Prop 39, although there's not a whole lot the committee can do, any resident of the district can seek an urgent enjoyment of the bond program. And California state law goes to great lengths to encourage people that are in a situation where they think an agency is not doing what it's supposed to ask for court relief, and those are expedited cases. And unless the petition is clearly frivolous, there is clearly a bias. This is not legal advice, and today I'm not an attorney. I'm just telling you my own experience after 20+ years doing this stuff. There is a bias in favor of taxpayers who are trying to seek redress from a problem in the government agency. And typically legal fees involved are paid by the district in this case. So in other words, the state law doesn't want citizens to be frustrated or intimidated in trying to get relief from a situation which they feel is inappropriate. So the issue here is non-compliance with Prop 39. And I think that's
Okay,
all I wanted to say.
are there any questions for Jack?
We're not allowed to ask questions on public comment.
Brief questions are allowed, however, as he read it, and you've done a great job of putting the code in here, brief questions can be answered.
Yeah.
However, if it cannot become a discussion item, as I said, we would have to put that on the agenda.
Right, well, it doesn't seem to be any,
I have a brief question.
okay,
The Cocoa Tax, is that the name of your organization?
We're the Contra Costa Taxpayers Association.
Taxpayers Association.
We are the only bona fide taxpayer advocacy organization in Contra Costa County. And that determination was made by the county clerk. So for example, we are entitled to write ballot arguments on the tax issues.
all right. Do we have another public comment?
We do.
All right,
So, Anton Younger, you may unmute.
Thank you. This is Anton Young here. Welcome, Jack. I'm glad you got there. to the
I
meeting.
can't hear you though. Just a second. Let's see.
Jack Ware and I were the co-founders of the California.
There we go. Just a second. I can hear you on my side, but let me see if I can get you to the owl. There we go. All right, try again.
This is Anton Young here. Thank you. I'm the co-founder with Jack Ware of the California Association of Bond Oversight Committee. We just celebrated our 4th anniversary on September 19th of this year. We had a very successful statewide conference a couple of weeks ago. We just announced our new website where we now have 25 courses with videos, examples. And by the way, I want to congratulate the school district because a number of the examples that we have on our website, your bond program, management plan, your reports on the status of projects, we've used those as examples of good examples of bond oversight, as well as the tracking you do of Public Record Act requests by various board members. So I want to congratulate the district on those matters. I want to follow up on what Jack talked about, the forensic audit. That forensic audit cost $1 million. It was done in 2016. That forensic audit recommended 112 recommendations for the school district to improve its operation. Part of that school district recommendation was that there be a task force set up to monitor the implementation of those 112 school districts. That task force met for about a year and went out of business. There was a follow-up audit by Moss Adams, commissioned by the district to determine how many of those 112 recommendations were approved and implemented. That audit found that 33 of the 112 recommendations had been implemented. Subsequent to that, Moss Adams was asked to follow up on recommendations that had not been implemented, as well as any audit was also asked. So those are the so-called 1.5.2 audits. Those audits have not been completed. Those audits have not been completed. It's been over 7 years. It's been over 7 years, and those 79 recommendations have not been confirmed as implemented. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Anton. Any brief questions? No, okay. Then that'll end the public comment period. The next session, we're not having the, is to the agenda, to accept the agenda. Well, I know that the guest speaker is not here, so that will be changed. Are there any objections to the agenda? Are there any items that you would like to pull from the agenda?
I would like to speak.
Okay,
Anything?
Anton?
I have made, I have sent to the chair and committee extensive suggested edits on the September 2022 minutes of September 2023 minutes. I would like to suggest that those 2 minutes be pulled off the agenda.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if someone would make a motion to pull that.
So we don't need to do that. You can do that. As presuming just like you pulled the guest speaker,
Yes,
you can pull item G1.
all right. G1B,
Okay, so we're keeping the
yes, okay.
September 12th, 2023. Okay.
Very good, we'll pull those. Any other objections to the agenda? With no other objections, we will pass the agenda as is. Now we're going to CBOC reports and action items. We have the annual report update. Unfortunately, we marked down the time that John has arrived.
I'm sorry. On your agenda, don't you have the district report?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, all right. I'm sorry, there's Melissa, all right. She just appeared. Before Melissa You're going to be doing the financial and give us a training. Before we get to your training, could I hand something out? Okay, thank you. So whenever you're ready, if you do the financial.
I'm pulling everything up now, so if you wanted to go ahead
Okay,
and get started.
good. In her this is gonna be a lot of training tonight. In her training, I'm passing out you've seen this before in our other ones, individual project reports. And what I did was I asked them to give us some training, and I said, Ellen, we're gonna see this report every meeting. We've got to know what's on it and understand it. So these are just a couple of the ones in there from tonight's. And if you just take one and pass it down. So that when she's giving her report, and I said to her, there's certain things on here that we should know. What does DSA mean? What is the difference between the contractor and the inspector? What does notice to proceed mean? What is a change order? Things like this that will be read, so you know when you see it what these things are. And she came up with a very creative way. Melissa has, her department has set up a bond program management plan. And they use that to tabulate where everything is going, and they have chains of procedures and all. And she said, why don't I answer these questions by telling them about the bond management program? So she's going to be doing that, but while she's answering the questions, we'll stop and point them out here so you can see what she's talking about.
I keep getting a failed message. So I keep trying to join as a panelist, and that's not exactly working. And so we're gonna improvise just a little bit.
Okay.
Because I wanted to share my screen, but I'm struggling to join the Zoom as a panelist. Just 1 second.
Would you rather we go into Ellen's?
Why don't we do that? And I'll go grab a different laptop, because I really wanted it to be interactive so I could share the plan with you guys. So I think it's important that I have a computer that's working.
Is that okay with you all?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I'll be right back.
So, Ellen,
Yes.
why are we on Zoom? We're not seeing the same things we're seeing on the screen.
Well, because at the moment we were talking about general stuff and we weren't actually like focused on the agenda items. So I was waiting until we got to the agenda item.
Okay.
So we
But
have
now I was just in the process of sharing the screen. So, so let's see, if we go to, well, I lost my scroll bar. Tonight does not seem to be a great, like, see this black line? That's supposed to be a scroll bar. But it doesn't seem to want to come up. So we're just gonna do it this way and it's gonna be fine. Close your eyes for a second. There
Use
we
your
go.
imagination.
Welcome, or thank you for having me again. My name is Ellen Mejia Hooper. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Construction, which is much more my expertise than running a Zoom meeting. So, but the project status update is, Kendi, Richmond, and Stige. We have movement on this particular part of the project, and I have a couple slides later on to go over the board meeting that occurred on the 8th, and we were very excited to be able to have budget allocation for all 3 of those projects and scope definition for 2 out of the 3. So we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Excuse me, Ellen, can you delete that column on the right?
Don't think it's going to help get any bigger, but
Can you enlarge it at all? Because we don't have to see everything at once. You can just.
Thank you.
Scroll bars. Really useful.
And this is page 30 in the agenda.
So, Kennedy Critical Needs, the demo of the 100 and 200 building, we are still working in schematic design development. It's a combo of those two phases put together, so we're working on that. Shannon's critical need projects, the bids actually came in today. So we are looking forward to hopefully doing a bid award on, I believe, the 6th, correct? Yes, December 6th. For construction, we have our lake projects, which we have slides on, our Hercules project, which we have slides on. Collins and Cameron are still awaiting our equipment before we have any update on those particular projects. Riverside, E-Rate, and Kenby's Fields are all in closeout. Kenby Field, we did get certification from DSA this month, so that's a good milestone to report on. And Pinole Valley High is with the California Geologic Review.
Are there any questions on the chart? I have one.
Okay,
Yeah. Ellen, underneath Pinole Valley High School,
yes.
you've got a California Geotechnical Review in progress now. I thought the Pinole Valley was almost in the closeout. Is this normal to have this type of review?
No, so there, during construction, there was, the hillside did shift while we were under construction. And so we put in a temporary buttress during the construction project, but when we consulted with DSA, which is the Division of State Architect, who's our permit agency, they directed us to create a new project for the repair of that hillside. And when you have a project that requires or that has this kind of element to it, you are required before getting DSA approval to go to the State Geologic Society to be able to get their approval first. So while that is a standard part of our process for most projects, doing it at the end to repair a hillside is unique. So we are
Okay.
ever in a unique situation.
Another question I have is, would you explain, I know there's a punch list and there's a closeout. Could you explain those two terms?
So punch lists are really when the contractor believes they are complete with the work, they will call us, or there will be what's called a punch list, which the architect will go through and review the work as well as district staff to ensure that all of the work is completed that's required by the contract documents. And if there's anything that isn't completed or isn't completed to the satisfaction of those, as well as the, all the engineers normally come out as well as the inspector, then they create what they call the punch list, which is all the deficiencies or things that still need to be addressed before we can actually finish the project.
It's like a walkthrough and this is done, that's done.
Right, and so it creates, and it's an itemized list, depending on the complexity of the project, it can be rather simplistic if it's a small project, but for larger bond projects, it normally includes photographs, and there's actually multiple lists depending on which engineer was reviewing the work, and it's quite a process to go through. Once those items have been identified, the contractor keeps working to complete them, and then whoever created the original item would come out and double check that it's been completed. And so that's the punch list process, which is one of the components of closeout, I would say. But there's many other components of closeout, most of which are paperwork components. So making sure we have BM&O manuals, making sure that the as-built are complete and they're correct, final cleaning, those kind of things, closeout.
Now, I remember at one time there was a question about a change order.
Mhm.
And I think you went into litigation or something. And so it didn't get closed out for a year or something like that for a while. And does that happen during the closeout? You wait until all things are finished before you do the final closeout?
The closeout can happen in many ways, right? So closeout, I mean, you can talk about closing out a project. We use a closeout in a lot of different fashions, right? So you have a project or a piece of work. And you can close out that contract, right? So a contractor, you hire contractor A to go out and renovate a restroom, but you have a project that's like renovate the school. And so you can contract and close out that particular project, like the restroom renovation. But you can also, you will have a closeout, if you will, as you close out the overall project budget, if you will, right? Or the overall project, there's a closeout phase to that portion of it as well. So it's a term that's kind of used universally, but it's particular to a type of task.
So
So-
after the construction is done, the closeout can go on for a while.
Well, and there's closeout with different vendors, right? So you have your closeout that you do with your builder. You're also gonna have a closeout process that you're gonna do with different engineers and the architect. And then a lot of times, if you see something that stays on the report a little bit longer, we call that the financial closeout and reconciliation, because we have to resolve all of the contracts associated with that project, confirm that we have final billings, that those have been paid and processed. And so that's a process that takes a little bit longer because it's kind of close out of the entire project and any commitment, contract, purchase, and all payments and expenditures associated with that project. And so once we complete a financial reconciliation and close out for a project, when there's a project budget that might be left, a lot of times we would take that back to the board for action, because any increase or decrease to the project budget requires board approval.
Oh.
So that's probably the closeout that takes the longest, because it's a closeout across all of your different contracts. But on the project side, you know, there's a number of different closeout variables that are outlined in our contracts for the different types of vendors that work on all of our projects.
Okay, thank you. You? Don?
Thank you. I've got two items here. With regards to punch list, one of the last major projects that I worked on before I retired was $1 billion coker at the Shell refinery. My crew was in charge of punch list items for about 6 months. We would get about 500 new punch list items every day on there. Sometimes they're major items, but most of the time they're relatively small items on there. Now, of course, that's $1 billion project, and oil refinery is not quite the same as our school projects. But I remember, for instance, when we had the walkthrough at Helms, as it was finished, one of the punch list items was removing about a mile worth of blue painter's tape in the library up around the ceiling area. It's just like nobody really picked up their head and say, wait a minute, kind of jumping out at you. Now, who should pay for removing that tape? Should we have district people doing it, or should we have the contractors who are already paid to remove it as part of their construction project? We had a wooden trellis and a walkway that was only being held in place by a couple of pieces of tie wire. Okay, as we walked by, and I made a mistake, whoa, almost fell through it. And fell to the bottom floor. I think maybe we ought to shoot some screws in there to put it in place. Yes, we thought so, but sometimes they're relatively simple. And there are things that, that's why you also have different sets of eyes taking a look at it. You may be looking at it, and I may be looking at it. You're looking at one thing, I'm looking at a different thing. But between the two of us, we got a better chance of actually seeing what's there and what needs to be fixed and finished, I should say. But with regards to the hillside remediation at Pinole, that's been an ongoing issue for an extremely long time. In fact, we had numerous lawsuits when they were still designing the school, because the people living up above didn't seem to think that their houses should be sliding down the hill. And I know that they were supposed to be filing some lawsuits a year or two ago on that. I don't know what the disposition of those were, but do you have a budget for the remediation project on there? And
There is still technically funds within the Pinole allocated budget that have not been expended.
but I mean, let's just throw into some numbers, just be facetious, that you've got $1 million left in the budget for that, but you find out that it's $10 million worth of work. I mean, do we have any idea how much it may cost us on there? And what do we do?
We
Go
need
back
to
to the
get
board?
approval of the design first before we can have a estimated budget of how much it'll cost.
Okay,
And so we're still waiting for, we're going back and forth with comments with the California Geological Society, CGS is normally how we refer to them. And once we have a finalized design, then it's the time that we'll be able to have a cost estimate and know where to go with it.
Okay, I would expect that this is a question that's gonna come up numerous times as we work through this. Because, repairing a hillside, especially if it's as bad as the homeowners above it say it is, that could be a healthy price tag to it. And this is already an extremely expensive school, we're running out of money. I said, whatever money we may have to throw into the budget on there, may have to come out of those schools or stage. So it is a concern for people. Thank you.
Okay.
What is the approach to public comment? Is it after the entire presentation or?
It's usually after, we're done with our questions and you go to the public.
Because we have a raised hand, that's why I'm asking. I don't know if it's the,
Yeah,
It may be prudent to have those questions asked while it's being presented.
Yeah.
Instead of half hour later,
right,
when nobody can remember what we're talking about.
okay.
okay. Anton? I'm pressing the ask to unmute button. Is this your hand? Was it just remaining up or do you have another comment or question? If you haven't unmuted, so you have to first unmute. Okay. Maybe he just left his hand up. I'm going to lower your hand so I can tell if you raise it again. Okay, moving on.
All right, move on.
Lake Elementary School. Because we missed a month of September, I'm showing you the before from basically the same angle from September to October. And then this is how it looks, or at least how it looked about a week ago. So as you can tell, we have our scaffolding up. The butterfly canopy has its roofing applied. We're in our brown coat for the stucco. So things are moving along. Each building is getting stuccoed in sequence. And while one layer is drying, the other layer is going on the other buildings. So this particular image is of the B building. And so the A building is already on its finished coat. Here's an interior shot of the A building. This is within the library. As you can see, this was the one from last month where we were still at the tape. Now we are to the first coat of interior paint. So that's moving along. In building B and C, they are still working on completing the taping and plaster and getting ready for prepping for painting. Insulation is still going in. This is the final piece because the scissor lift, this was the last piece that they had to complete, and this is in the C building. So A building is the furthest along. They're going to B and they're going to C. So that's how the sequencing is designed. And that's what we're working on. Hercules, middle and high school critical needs projects. The biggest activity that's going on is placing the, digging the footings and placing the rebar in. This is from about a week ago. We are planning on pouring the footings on Wednesday. This is also the biobasin construction. So previously we had the rebar, then it's been poured. And they're stripping the frames now. So those are getting formed up, and those really formed the side of the project so that we were able to start construction in the middle. As I said earlier, we did have a board workshop for facilities on November 8th. It revolved around the implementation of Measure R. For the different projects of Kennedy and Richmond, the board, yes.
Could you just tell us a little bit of the history that you had a budget presented and the district, oh, you're doing that?
That's
Okay,
what the
great.
slide is. Okay, so we started with site selection, and quite a while ago, the board prioritized Kennedy, Richmond, and Stige for Measure R dollars. After that was done, we did a site master planning process for Kennedy and Richmond. And that resulted in 2 fully completed campus rebuilds. However, both of the master plans came in over budget if we were trying to build both projects at the same time with Measure R dollars. So we went back starting last May to the 2 school sites and really looked at a prioritization process to create a scope within the budget of Measure R, utilizing the building assessments, goals and major themes, and desired changes and deficiencies that were set forward by the master plan, and looking for opportunities to complete as many of the needs as possible within those funds. And on the November 8th, we presented the options, which are behind us, and as well as a recommendation for budget allocation for all 3 projects. This leads us into the architectural design phase, which we hope to begin shortly as soon as we award the contracts to the architect, or amend the contracts to the architect. Facilities set forward particular project parameters for both Richmond and High and Kennedy High Schools to try to make sure that these projects had similar baselines. And the first part for that was just what minimum modernization means. Modernization is a term that is used all over the place, and it can be defined many different ways. So how we defined it was that we needed new low voltage systems, fire alarm, intercom, bell, clock systems, as well as an energy management system for all the buildings that remain, as well as accessibility improvements, which would have been required by DSA no matter what, and an interior finish and exterior finishes. In addition to that, depending on the assessments and the current condition of either the roof or the HVAC, we would require that those were accounted for to be replaced. We also set up a requirement for schedule that both of these projects were supposed to be completed concurrently, and the pre-design or the design phases for phase 1 would be complete and submitted for permitting before they started really the design development of phase 2 and 3, in order to try to get people into the buildings as soon as possible. Then all phases needed to complete by 2030. And we also created parameters around budget, which was that the hard cost for construction was $185 for each of the schools, and that we met with both of the cost estimators that were on each one of the teams so that they could have a discussion about the best way to approach the assumptions that go into every cost estimate, to make sure that they had similar assumptions for things like escalation and contingency. And those were established between those 2 cost estimating groups so that we could have apples to apples comparison on the estimates.
Ellen?
Yes.
Just for everybody else, one of the problems with this modernization is that from the time that we start designing something to the time that it's actually built and installed, sometimes the technology changes so dramatically. I mean, I remember one of our schools, I was shocked at the computer room had 56 electrical outlets in there because we had desktop computers on there. And of course, you got the computer, you got the monitor. I said, as a person that only had 7 electrical outlets in my whole house, I just, salivating over all those electrical outlets. But just about the time that the paint was dry on the place, they were no longer using desktop computers.
Mhm.
Yeah, they'd gone to the laptops or the tablets, and they'd have big trays or carts, or just stick it in there to recharge and everything. So if we spend a lot of money on that, I mean, I can't remember how many times, I think, Pearl Middle School, where you had the CRT TVs hanging down from the ceiling instead of the big flat screens. It just, the technology changes so much, and it's a difficult thing to deal with, because they have no idea what tomorrow is gonna be. And meeting before last, got some kind of fancy whiteboard or something.
Yes.
I never could figure that one out. I need to look that up, because I want to get one of those for myself. Best Buy sell those things? I need to get one. But it's, again, the technology is changing so much, it's difficult to stay on top of it.
I think we have to,
Madam Chair. Question.
yes,
Thank you, Ellen. So back on slide 41, or just the defining project scopes,
Yes.
can you speak a little bit to what was involved in, the active consultation with the community on the scoping phase?
Yes, actually, I think, maybe. We tried I guess I pared it down a little too far. So I did have a slide in the presentation that was to the board that explained that. But we had a variety of opportunities for the public to be involved. One of them, or the starting point of that, was that each one of the newsletters and flyers that went out were not only distributed to the school sites, but also the feeder schools. So they went to middle schools and the elementary schools that fed into that. We did 2 surveys at Kennedy. We did 1 survey at Richmond. We had 2 community meetings for Richmond, 1 for Kennedy. The architects went to the orientation and back to school nights. They did tabling at lunch to meet with students. At Kennedy, we had the architects do a workshop with the leadership group. At Richmond during summer school, they allowed us to do workshops with kids, or students, sorry, they're high schoolers, I'm not allowed to call them kids. And so we had a variety of mechanisms. There was also a steering committee for both schools. Each school had their own steering committee that we met with several times to review the process to date and what information had come in, and to try to continue to narrow options and discuss priorities.
Well, was the steering committees at the school made up of PTA members or school site council members, or was it kind of can you describe those groups?
We tried for the biggest variety of representation as we could get. So we had some teachers, we had some parents, we had community members that had some more successful attendance than others. We had students in them, administration from the school site. So we tried to get a decent swath. I believe we tried to have a school site council member on both of them. But I can't guarantee that. I know we invited them to have a representative, but I can't remember off the top of my head if we technically did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ellen. So, I assume the budget is available online, right? Is it available to the public, the details of the budget?
Now that we have a selected option, we are having the architects put together a final booklet of the information of this process, and so that'll be included within that.
Okay.
Okay, speaking of budget, so let's talk about available budget or revenue. And so as this group, I'm sure, is aware, we currently have Measure R has $575 million, and 8.6 of that has already been budgeted, 6.6 for the Kennedy Fields project, as well as 1 million for each of the schools for planning budget to start the modernization project, which is the budget that allowed the planning and scoping process to go forward, as well as site surveying. And on the state revenue side, state facilities revenue, I don't know if you want to expand upon this, but is really the source that comes from the reimbursement of going after state matching dollars. And so this program has been very successful in getting matching dollars. Luckily, the state accelerated their distribution, and since November of last year, basically, we've received 15.6 million, and we knew those applications were in, but we weren't quite expecting them as quickly as it happened. But that allowed us to have $43.3 million currently in our account for that account stream.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, and for the benefit of people here, that free money that we're talking about, a lot of that was in the earlier days. Essentially, we got 6 elementary schools for free. I mean, that's when an elementary school didn't cost nearly as much as it does right now, that's for sure. But 6 elementary schools, that's big. Because some of us get to pay for these things for the rest of our lives. And knowing we don't have to do that, it's a good thing.
Okay,
So the recommendations to the board were for Richmond and Kennedy to allocate the remainder measure our bond authority. Because right now we don't have all the bond money actually in the bank, right? We have to do different issuances, but the authority by distributing 279.1 million to each of the high schools, which would be in addition to the $1 million planning budget to bring it up to 80.1. And then the Stage project to allocate 40.1 million of the state funds to augment the critical needs project. And just to bring you all back to 2016, we had a facilities master plan that identified critical needs projects for the remaining school sites that still were on the list of priority sites. And Stage's critical needs project was really to demolish one of the buildings and to move those students into portables on campus. However, that school site has tremendous need for updating, and we are quite a few years later than what we were when that recommendation was brought forward, and so those portables have continued to age, as well as the school site itself. And so as the third school, as prioritized by the board for Measure R, we looked at the state funds and recommended 40.1 be increased to that critical needs amount of 2.9, bringing the proposed change to 43 million. And so, spoiler alert, the board did approve the budget allocations for Kennedy, Richmond, and Stage to the recommended amounts, resulting in this basically being the implementation for Measure R with the concentration at Kennedy and Richmond High.
any questions?
Now, you were in first.
No, I don't have that.
Okay, this question came up at the workshop, but even though I was there, I couldn't hear. But it's awfully coincidental that the budget allocation was exactly the same for both schools, even though the projects are completely different from each other. I mean, down to 1/10 of $1 million. Can you explain how that ended up?
So when we went to the board and asked about Measure R, and we came forward with the 2 master plans that were above and beyond what the budget allocation was, the direction that we heard from the board was that we needed to find a way to build both school sites at the same time, and utilizing the Measure R dollars. So the project parameters, as I said, back on that slide, to the architects were to create options within the hard construction costs of originally 175 million. Although after analyzing the soft costs, we extended that to 185. That was the parameter that we gave the architects to begin the options development process. So it was by design that they were both allocated the same amount of money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so for the approved option, we have for Kennedy, the approved option included, well, both options really had a new 100 and 200 replacement building, which allows us to build a new office and secure entryway, as well as replace the vast majority of the teaching stations on the campus within a new building, which of course would include things like windows and improved ventilation and many of the concerns that folks brought up for both safety, security, and health and wellness. The highlights here on the right-hand side are the major goals that came out of the process. And so we had safe and secure campus, health and wellness, inspirational and well-built, as well as supported learning environments. And so hitting most of those came forward with the 100 and 200 building replacement. On top of that, there's a cafetorium that is shown, let's see if this works, right here. And that is a combination of a cafeteria theater space. The idea behind that would be that we would have the ability to have formal acoustics, lighting, and a formal stage that could be protected and separated from the dining facility. But the multi-purpose room, when asked of what the top priority was, consistently came back as the most important thing for a rebuild, followed by theater. So knowing that we weren't going to have enough budget to build both of those new, this combination space was a good alternative. And one of the things the board brought up as a concern was the back of house functions, which we are including pieces of the theater back of house to make sure that this is a functioning performance space. The other nice part about the cafetorium being relocated here where the 500 building was, which happens to be the oldest building that was on the campus, is that all of your major event spaces are situated around the K, which is what they call the main quad of the campus. This is the K. And that was an important part of the master planning process goals that we were able to bring forward, which was a reorganization of the campus to really help, especially our newcomers. They're the ones that express this desire for us to be able to have a better organization and understanding of where things are on the campus. So within this area, we would have all of the major events except for the field space, as well as a good adjacency to the front office and the health center. So really kind of bringing those items together. Then the old cafeteria would be changed into a CTE and art space, which then allowed our CTE programs to be co-located and have good access to delivery and outdoor yard space, as well as a quad that would be adjacent to both science and math. And so really creating the opportunity for a STEM quad, which could support cross-curricular activities. So those are the highlights of the Kennedy project.
Can I ask a couple questions, please, of what we're looking at here? Kind of upper right, where the two purple buildings kind of meet. I'm seeing a grid. What is that?
That's just representing the exterior yard space.
Okay.
So that there would be outdoor learning space dedicated to the CTE programs.
Okay. Where is the main office located now?
Located now or located
No.
in the plan?
On your plan?
In the plan, that would be adjacent to the star over here,
Okay.
as well as the star over here. So it would be in this block.
All right. Reason I'm asking that is that what is now the teacher's parking lot, will that be opened up to the public?
Yes, the idea would be that that would be teacher and visitor parking.
Okay, if it's gonna be opening up, how are you gonna secure the teachers' cars? For safety,
Well, the current enclosure of the parking lot was due partly because of the entrance to the 500 building. And now that the 500 building and the clinic space, isn't located within that 500 building, that we're able to scoot back our perimeter of the campus.
okay. On Cutting Boulevard, well, near the bottom, I'm seeing another red star right by the word cutting. What is that?
That represents the before and after school entryway that would be available for those who are utilizing the drop-off zone.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Here, I have a question. I see some solar panels, hopefully. Are those financed by the bond program or are they gonna be?
Well, those are
PPA?
pre-existing, so they're.
Those are
already there.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, but they are leased.
they're PPA. So then what about, I assume that doesn't cover the whole load of the facility?
No, but there'll be calculations that will be required as we move through the design process, like you say. And we'll be looking at that as part of the green code.
Okay, to add potentially?
Potentially, there'll be requirements for that, we would imagine.
Okay.
as we go forward.
And then I guess related is there any type of review to look at just ongoing maintenance or operational costs? And trying to minimize those moving forward through the design process?
I think that's always been part of our design process and our ed spec standards. We're really to look at maintenance, standardization of products. Look at our folks actually maintain what's economical, those type items as we approach it. Absolutely.
And then Richmond is next. Oh, I'm sorry, this shows what's new construction versus modernization and renovation. So here it shows the new construction for the cafetorium and the new 100-200 building, as well as the field house maintenance area. The orange denotes modernization, where the pink is renovation, which means that we're adjusting the use of the space. So as previously stated, any building that remains does have at least a minimum level of modernization within the budget.
Sorry, can you go back for just a second? I'm seeing in the upper left, new parking. Is that new parking for staff or new parking for students?
It would be a combination of potentially staff as well as event parking, because this would be our event heavy center, being able to support it back here. This area is minimally developed at the moment. As we move into design, it's going to become more refined about the best layout of where those items want to go. Right now, it's just denoting that we would have some level of parking, basketball courts and tennis courts are needed back there. Part of the green code also, that makes it somewhat of a challenge to lay out every ounce of site area, is the requirement for handling our stormwater on site. And so that component at a master planning level isn't shown, but we know that it's going to take a certain amount of site space to do that. And so in general, we're showing the elements on here that we're hoping to accomplish, but they will be continue to be refined. We are super, super early in the design process. So you got to take these things with a grain of salt.
And one last question on this dead center near the top, what looks like a softball field. Okay, I'm also seeing a big rectangle in there. So, I mean, obviously a combination, but is that going to be turf or is that going to be asphalt? And what is the combination? Why is that big rectangle? What's that for?
That's for a practice field. So it's a combination practice field and softball field. And so the practice field can be utilized by any sport that uses a rectangle. So that'd be football, soccer, band, etc.
Turf or all weather or asphalt?
That is in the third phase, and so the determination of what exactly that would be is probably going to be more based on market value than what we have today.
Okay, I know that I'm not seeing any pickleball courts there, and maybe be turned into an Olympic sport pretty soon.
Okay, we have to move along.
Richmond. So Richmond had a similar process. We also had two options. The recommendation for this one was option 2. However, we did ask the boards for flexibility to adjust the placement of the new 2-story building in order to limit the intern housing and improve the drop-off area. So the selected option, for those who are not familiar with Richmond High, it might be better if I go to this slide first. This is a one large main building right now. And so structurally, though, this building is actually seven different pieces put together into a building complex. And so we are able to peel off certain portions of this building. And so the selected option and the part that the community liked the best about this option was the center area was removed. And so this is currently what's referred to as the mall space. It's a big open area that is roofed. And then in the center of it, it has a library space. And so taking that out really will open up this large building that, similar to Kennedy's 100-200 building, does not have any windows. And so it's all interior circulation. It does not have any windows. There was a lot of response from the community about it feeling very confining. And so the preferred option was to remove that center space. Additionally to removing the center space, the area along 23rd Street is being rebuilt with a 2-story complex building. The existing 2-story classroom buildings remodeled. The gym has a light remodel. The old gym, the auxiliary gym, is denoted in white here because it has very minimal scope. So going back to this, the other thing about Richmond is their educational program is organized within academies, which are basically the CTE program along with the humanities courses are intertwined together. And so that's the different colors that you see around here, where Kennedy's layout is really more departmental. This layout allows each academy to be co-located together, which is partially what's being accomplished today, but it will be better achieved in the new design. And so that's what's leading to these elements. And so that's Richmond. Yes.
Can you please show us on here where the newly built small gymnasium and the health center are located?
It's this white building in back is the new gym, and this is the health center in the front.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we weren't tearing them down before the paint's dry.
Nope. Okay. Then we have our construction newsletters. In here we have the 2 construction newsletters for for Kennedy and Richmond. They were released before the board workshop to make sure everybody was aware that we were doing the board workshop since it was a special board meeting, as well as the Lake newsletter. And we also have our construction status reports.
So could I jump in here and go back to the training? Because we wanted to do the training about like what a change order is and stuff before we did the status report training.
That sounds.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so thank you everybody for your patience. I apologize on the technical difficulties. So Louis has shared his laptop and we're going to jump right in. If you could share the Zoom screen on the big screen.
I think yes.
And I'd like to ask everybody if they could turn to page 19 in their packets. Really, really excited to share the program management plan with you. One of the things that makes this plan so special is it was really co-written with the CVOC. And that is 100% true. We met on this on a monthly basis. We worked on it together. And this was really uniquely crafted for our district. And so the program management plan, it's about 300 pages. It has an 80-page narrative. And then it's got a number of different resources and forms that really summarizes the work that we do. And it was really built out of a spirit of trying to give meaning and backup information to the work that we do so that it would be more accessible. And so this plan is supplemental. So this doesn't replace any type of board policy. It really just enforces it by providing kind of a day-to-day guide. One of the things that we worked on a lot with the program management plan was making it accessible. So you could click along, you could learn more about different things. And so what I'd really like to do is I'd like to just jump right into it. And so I'm going to click the link. And it is taking us, well, you can't see that because I need to do a new screen share. It takes us to the website. And so this is on the district website, and then you can click right here and download the plan. And so I have to do this because it was too perfect. You guys asked earlier in the meeting about punch list. So I typed it right up here in my find, and punch list is in the plan 9 times. So if you heard punch list come up at the meeting and you were like, I'd really like to understand a little bit more about punch list, it takes us right to the forgive me, I'm tired, the table of contents, and we could link, just click it, and it's gonna jump you right to the page. And then you can see again here, all of the places. So there's an area that talks about punch list. And then it'll find all the different places in the document where it's really talking about how that work's done and who does that work. And just for fun, because I tested this out when we were talking earlier, it actually showed up in one of the status reports, like what Ellen just shared. So when we're going through a punch list process on a project, you'll see that pop up in part of the description of the work that we're doing. And that's really how the PMP was created. It was really created to become this great resource. And so there were a couple of questions that Lorraine had asked in her email of things that we wanted to take a look at. And I thought, what better way than to do it through the PMP? So one of the things that happens on so many of these documents, and even when we're talking, is the alphabet soup of construction and project management. And it's a doozy. So we created an acronym appendix. And so again, I typed that right up here and it pulled it right up for me. So we're just going to jump to it. And here's our guide. So there's a guide in the documents that gives you different types of acronyms that we use that you might see on a report or you might see on the document that will tell you what that is. And so I also included in the presentation just kind of an explanation of how acronyms are used in the program management plan. One of the other questions that Lorraine had asked was, what about the agencies having jurisdiction? So you'll hear oftentimes, Ellen will mention DSA. Earlier today, the Division of State Architects. Earlier today, she mentioned CGS. So there are a number of different agencies. And so here we go. It popped right up in our table of contents and we're gonna click on it. So I put a little screenshot of this in the presentation for you guys so you could take a look. But we really gathered all of the different agencies that we have to work with. And what you'll see is these will come up in the project reports that Ellen will do. These things might pop up on the warrant checklist when you see, like, we paid a check to somebody. Who did we pay a check to? Why do we have to pay a fee to that agency? So in the program management plan, there's a little summary of the major agencies that have jurisdiction over our work that we do work with. And so that's also available here. And today, since we talked about CGS, when we were talking about Panola and the Hillside, you can see right here, there's just a little, so the California Geological Survey provides scientific products and services about the state's geology, seismology, and minerals that affect the health and safety and business interests of the people of California. So that's an agency that's reviewing the work for the Hillside. So kind of moving on to slide 24. One of the other questions that Lorraine had asked about was there are different kind of delivery methods in construction. And so most of our projects follow a design bid build, which is very traditional. But starting with our Michelle Obama campus replacement and our current Lake campus replacement project, those are design build projects. And so it's a different type of delivery method. And so sometimes you might see on the presentation, it'll say contractor, and sometimes it'll say design builder. So when you come across a term on the report, of course, ask us. We love to talk. We love to tell you all about it, but time is short. So you might want to just check it out when you get home. And so there's an entire section on the project delivery method. And you can see it provides a breakdown of design bid build, which is really common. That's when you'll hear us use the term contractor, architect, and it provides, you know, what are some of the different responsibilities and features and benefits. But then right below it is design build. And so on a report, when you see the design build entity, or we talk about a design builder, like we do for the Lake campus replacement, you wonder, well, what's different about that? The program management plan has a section that really kind of talks about those two different project delivery methods. And this is very surface level. This is very high level. They like to call it, it is the antenna view. So, you know, you could go to a conference for a week to learn all about design build. So it's very high level, but it's really meant to give you an idea and some context to the work that we do. And so one of the next questions, and I think one of the big questions that comes up and is something that we talk about a lot, is change orders. So you can see here, okay, oh, there's 127 change order hits in our program management plan. There's tons of stuff about change orders in here. And really, I think that's because the program management plan not only provides a narrative, which describes to you a little bit about the process and the terminology, but it also provides you with a number of the forms. And so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to go down our table of contents, and we're going to go down here to our appendices and resources, and we're going to see where we have change orders down there.
So you just highlight it and click it?
Yep. If you click it, it'll just jump you right to that section. So you can see here in 2.3.4, there's an outline of the change order process. And in this process, it talks about different things. It talks about a change order checklist, an approval form, a reason code, all kinds of fun stuff. But one of the things we wanted to do is if you didn't want to read the 300-page manual from cover to cover and you wanted to jump to the thing that you wanted to learn about, you can just click on it. And so this actually takes us to another area that we talk a lot about, which is how are change orders approved? And I think that's really important. And I don't want to be a complete spoiler for Ellen's presentation, but there's essentially two ways that change orders go to our board. So if the value of the change order cumulative is less than 10% or less than 250,000, it goes to the board for ratification. And so there's a table, she'll be sharing that with you in just a few minutes. So it goes for ratification. If a change order cumulative across the project is greater than 10% of the contract value or greater than 250,000, it goes to the board as an action item. So one of the things that we really partnered on was, how do we describe the work that we do and how do we make it something that you can access and really kind of connect, whether it's happening here at the CDOC meeting, how it's being presented at the board meeting, and how it just happens day to day here in our office. And so that's really what we hoped the program management plan would do. And so if you look at page 26 in your handout, you can see there's a little picture there of the board table, which is what our change order ratification looks like. And I will show you that in a second, but before we do, I'm gonna jump to the last question, which was about who are all of these people that are working on all of our projects? And so there's another reference here.
This is page 27, the question.
Yes, so now I jump to page 27, just because
That's
I
fine.
have to keep changing my screen share. We talk about all these people. So even earlier today, we said our architect has a closeout process. Our engineers have a closeout process. Our inspectors have a closeout process. Who are all of these people that we're working with? And so here's a list of a lot of the consultants that you would typically see on different projects. And the reason why we think that's so important to share with you and for you to have these resources is I'm now going to switch back to the presentation. So moving down our slides, those were just kind of some screenshots. I'll come back to change orders in just a second. But you see here, it identifies kind of who our people are that we're working on. Well, then when you look at the AP checklist and you look at the financial reports that are provided, it gives you an idea of who are we paying on these projects, what they're doing. And so we really think that it's important to understand who are the different people. They say, you know, it takes a team to build a project. One person can't build a project alone. And we really want to help connect that to our financial reports. And so on the last page of the presentation, I have a little fun example here because I know Ms. Humes has the Munis resource for you. So Munis is our financial system. And we follow a standard account structure code as a school district. But there's a lot of information. And so on our AP checklist, there is a short account code. And that short account code gives you a lot of information. So first it's going to tell us who, and then it's going to tell us the amount that we paid them and when. But this short account code here's kind of like a cheat sheet for the short account code. So you know by the first two digits that it's Fund 21, that's the bond program. The next four numbers are the resource. And so the resource tells you which bond measure has these funds. And so whether it's measure R, which we heard from Ellen earlier today, our measure R projects versus measure E 2012 or D 2010. So those next four digits are telling you the resource. That's which bond measure is where those funds came from. And then the next three digits give you the object. And then the next string gives you the project number. So I did an example over here for you. So on our account warrant checklist here, we have ERA Construction, and they have a project short account string that's 21. We know it's the bond fund. It's 9745. So we know that that's measure D 2010. And then it says 6170. And that's a little tricky because ERA was our builder on this job. And a lot of times your builder will be 6211. But this project in particular was a site project. It wasn't a building project. It was the Riverside's critical needs project where they basically did playground improvements. So in the program management plan, there's this little cheat sheet that tells you that because it was for site and not for building, it has a different object.
Excuse,
Yes.
hi, time-wise, we hit, so I'm going to have to ask if there are no objections, can we extend the 30-minute period? How much longer do you two think you need?
I could wrap up in like 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But then there was the presentation of the change order project status report. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably another 5 to 7.
All right, well, let's say in 10 minutes, shall we? Any objections to continue? Okay, thank you.
And so the last three digits, 150, that tells us it's Riverside. So on the AP checklist, there's a lot of information there. Our AP checklist tells us at the top that all of these warrants belong to the Riverside project. So all of these checks were paid against the Riverside project. But this short account code actually tells us everything if we didn't have all that other information. So I wanted to share one more example. And that is, you can see also here under Riverside SVA Architects. So the name of the firm kind of gives it away. This is probably our architect, but let's check the short account code just to make sure. So SVA Architects, we can see, okay, Fund 21, this is the bond program. 9745, we're able to confirm, this is Measure D 2010. Next four digits, 6201. So looking at our bond program resource guide, we can see here that object 6201 is what identifies the architect of record. Last three digits in our short account code tell us it's for Riverside. And so I really just wanted to share that with you tonight. And I hope that you will find that the program management plan will be a resource that will help guide you. And if you ever have any questions, I encourage you to check out the program management plan or let us know. It is a living document. And so it's something that we're currently going through an update on now as new practices evolve. There's ways to do things better. So please, if you have any recommendations, revisions, or comments on how we can improve it, please be sure to let us know so that we can continue to improve our plan and really create some transparency about the work that we're doing and how we're doing it.
I have one questions, all right. Let's, 2 minutes? Let's try to keep it at 2 minutes. My question was that on the website, on your facilities website, you have quick links. This is not on that. Is there, can it be put there or is it too
Absolutely.
proprietary?
We
Okay.
will add it.
Okay.
And
It's easier than remembering. the
I'd like
address.
to thank Anton, you know, he mentioned earlier in the meeting, our program management plan is one of the resources on the KBOC website.
Mhm.
And so it's available in a couple of places, but absolutely, we will make it a quick link to our facilities main page.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Ariel?
Oh, yes, so I have two questions.
Mhm.
Number one is, who's responsible for updating this document? Is it your department?
Yes.
How often will you update this document?
So we really should be updating it more than we are. Right now, we're working on filling some vacancies in our department. And so I hope once we get to full staff, we'll be able to bring these updates more often. But we should be bringing an update at least once a year.
Once a year?
Mhm. There's a number of statutes that provide different procurement thresholds and things, and that's something that is adjusted typically annually. And so we think it's important that as even those legislative changes are made, that they're reflected in our plan. And so that's why we were shooting for annually.
Don?
When you update, it says it is a living document, you amend the file name with, for instance, a date. So that you're not looking at this year's and I'm looking at last year's.
So it's an excellent question and I appreciate it because we came up with 4 different ways to do it and then we tried to pick which one we thought was best. So when you go to that page and you click on the main document, that will be the one that's most up to date. And then what's published below it on the page is what changes were made. So when you go to the website, that is the most up-to-date document and below will be a summary of the changes that were made from the original. If you were keeping, for example, the original document and you wanted to match those changes.
Well, follow-up question on that.
Absolutely.
Again, I've archived the plan on there. Okay, but now if I go online, I'm gonna open it up and look for the explanations before I tell them whether this is an update or whether it's the one that I already have. So in the file name itself, I don't know that. I have to go to do more work to learn that. Really?
So in the update that we're working on, sounds like we need to be sure that the date is part of that file name. So right off the bat, you'll know for sure. And then we'll add that to the list of changes that we're making so that we'll be really transparent about
I
that.
appreciate that, because having been working in construction, we work on a lot of blueprints, because every blueprint name, every time it gets updated,
Mhm,
it changes the name on there. Yeah, it's got a revision number. I wouldn't necessarily ask for that for this, but the date would make a big difference.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
All right,
Quick question, when did this first come in, get approved? And what was the kind of the time period of the collaboration with the CBOC?
Was about 2 years. So, and really this was born out of the 2016 forensic accounting investigation made a number of recommendations. And so one of the things that's included in the plan is an audit guide. And part of what that audit guide identifies is like, if this is the recommendation, this is how we're implementing that recommendation. And so we thought it was really important that that be an integral part of the document, because 5 years from now, if the people change, the internal controls and the process and the commitment shouldn't. But part of the way of ensuring that was we thought we had to leave those footprints so that people could see kind of what those were based in, so that in a future change, it wasn't potentially taken away because it's really seeped in those recommendations. It was about a 2-year process. And it was originally approved by the board, I want to say in 2020. I'll have to confirm that for you. I want to say it was yesterday, but somehow it wasn't. So I'll confirm that.
That was Melissa's baby and she did an outstanding job.
Great.
thank you, Melissa. And we have how many minutes left?
3 minutes and 6 seconds.
Sorry. Yeah,
Could you stop sharing?
do you want more time?
I
Need more
did
time
stop
on that?
share.
Okay. Finish. Right as I was asking, she was just like on it. So. As far as the, I don't know, an extra, maybe 5 minutes,
Okay,
I'll allow for a question or two, since that seems to be the theme of the night.
pardon?
If you do an extra 5 minutes, then I'll allow a question or two.
An additional
So
5.
so any objections? So we'll extend it. Thank you.
Okay, and then let me share the screen I just brought up onto the other part. Okay, so, a lot of those questions were, derived out of this document, which is our project status report. So, the project status report has a variety of information, but really it's covering all the highlights of every project. So we have a little scope section as well as a little schedule section, but that whole question about, the project team and who's on each project is right here, as far as the contractor, the contract manager, and the inspector. We also have, I'm gonna go off of Collins and Cameron were a little bit of a weird one because we had one contractor, but 2 projects. So it's definitely the odd man out. So I'm gonna go down to Hercules here. And so
That's page 55. if you're-
we have the project team as well as the project schedule. And then on the other side of the document, we have the contract summary, and this is really where we talk about the financial components. And of course, Hercules, this one's an early one in the project, so at this point in time, we don't have any submitted change orders or PCOs, so maybe that wasn't the best way to go, sorry. At Collins and Cameron, we do have a variety of pending PCOs as well as rejected. And then these are all in progress. So when you see the pending change orders, it's just that they're pending, they're under review. We're still doing analysis. So the pending ones are either ones that have just been submitted, so we haven't reviewed them yet, or they're somewhere in the review process but haven't been submitted to the board yet for approval. There's also a number of reasons why we might reject a PCO. Either, not that every contractor would ever do this, but occasionally there's things in the documents that are defined and Sometimes they feel like they deserve, additional funding for those, and we have to say, no, that was clearly stated in the contract documents, so we're rejecting that. But it's a lot of times is more nuanced than that. Another thing is when we run into an unforeseen situation, we have to come up with a game plan of how to get around it. We can't just stop because we ran into a problem, right? So sometimes we explore different ways of solving those problems, and the contractor helps us by doing proposed change orders to tell us which solution or how much that would potentially cost if we were going to go down this road or that road. Obviously, we would reject the one that we didn't go forward with and go down the road that we needed to with the approved change order. But that's what ends up happening with the rejected or voided. The other thing is occasionally when you're in construction, you run into situations where they're like, oh, it might be nice if we actually just resolve this right now. We will ask for a price. If that's just not within the project budget, then we have to leave that behind. And so that's a voided PCO of like, that would have been a nice thing to do, but it's just not feasible with the cost that they gave us. So there's a variety of ways that the PCOs come forward, but then once they go to the board, they become change orders. And as Melissa stated, and since we're short on time, there are different reason codes. They are defined within the PMP, so you can read further on those. The last section here is the project updates section. And so Lorraine was very nice, and she put together this slide that really took the piece of the project status report from Riverside and the similar chart that goes to the board when we go for ratification of change orders. And so what this shows is previous to when we took these change orders to the board, we had denoted in our pending PCOs that we had a group of pending PCOs. Now you'll notice that the pending PCO price is higher than what is on the chart for what went to the board as the PCO pending ratification. And that's not unusual. So one of the things that our team does very diligently is check the contracts and the general conditions for what's an allowable expense and what's not allowable expense. And so we mark up the change orders often to make sure that they stay within the percentages allowed within the contract for markup, that they're not charging for things that aren't allowable within our general conditions. And so just because of a change order submitted, it's not just accepted at face value. There is a level of evaluation and occasionally negotiation that occur before it becomes a change order that comes to the board. So that's why you'll see that come forward. Then over here on the far side, you'll notice that we have the change order reason code. And I don't know. Oh, it does. Okay. And so the explanation or the key to what these numbers mean over here are listed at the bottom of every chart. I just want to make sure it didn't get cut off on this one. Yeah. But that really tells you which reason code. So then when you go over to this section of the project status report, these get filled in once it's approved by the board, but not before. So since this date of 9/1 was before the board meeting, there's nothing in the change order column here yet. But when it would come in is after the board approved it, and they would be identified within each one of these subcategories of the reason code that would be similar to what you see over on this side. Now you can tell here that all of these are zeros, which match this portion of the chart, which says previous approved ratified COs. They're zero because before this change order, there were no change orders. And that's why our status report also had zeros in the change order column, but we did identify that we had some pending PCOs that were under review.
I have, on your reasons, your change order reasons,
Yes.
in the case of Riverside, if you look to the left-hand bottom, it gives a definition of them.
Mhm.
And it's a number 3 for reason, and reason is design deficiency.
Mhm.
And we're paying, what, $38,000 or dollars for, whose fault is that? And do we have to pay it? Or does the contractor pay it, or what?
No, we pay that. There's all different levels, right? And it's very hard to prove error and omissions against an architect, but there are oversights that happen in the design process. As Ellen had pointed out, there are multiple folks that work on plans. So you have, a structural engineer, a civil engineer, anywhere along the line, you have an architect that oversees all those disciplines. But sometimes there's things that happen where they don't actually, one set of drawings may not match the other, and it may be a change by civil that may not get picked up by the structural. And so there's conflicts in that. And so sometimes we pay for those conflicts that happen. And we look at it mostly in the light that if it's an item that we would have paid for anyways, had the drawings been correctly produced, then typically that's an item that's a change order that we would normally pay. Because the contractor hadn't been in the drawings, he would have priced it and we would have paid for it anyways.
And is this described in the paperwork,
Is it described in the paper?
in the change order paperwork, what happened and why?
Well, in a change order, yes, absolutely. I mean, it'll tell you the reason for the change, what the change is, and how it occurred.
Okay, any other questions? Hey,
Hello,
Eric?
so it's also a question for change order reason. So there's number 4, outside agency. What does that mean?
Outside agency, so if Melissa explained earlier in the PMP about outside agency, is a CGS, the Geological Society, DSA.
Okay.
So basically our permitting agency, it could be the health department. So sometimes there's submittals that we make after the contract's been released. But if it comes back that these changes, say health department, so we're doing a kitchen improvement or something, and the health department tells us that we need to add an air curtain in the door, and we didn't have an air curtain in the door. So it's not that it was missed by the architect, it was an agency review comment that came back to us after the drawings were produced or after it was bid. It would be a requirement to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We have that example at Collins for PG&E, Collins and Cameron project. Um,
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
That takes care of the district reports. We are now at 8:00. We can amend the agenda. I would like to, I'm sorry, I'd like to extend the meeting so that we can talk about the annual report in the CVOC reports. So say we extend the agenda for 10 minutes.
We don't have
Any,
a time limit.
we don't have time, okay, all right, good. All right,
Keep going.
good. All right, the annual report, number 2. Unfortunately, we have lost 2 of our,
One is the approval of minutes. We still left the 1A.
oh, okay, I'm
So
sorry.
if there are no
Alright,
objections.
No objections to 1A, September 22nd, 2022. Minutes. 1, 2, 3. No objections, it should pass. We lost 2 of the main writers for the annual report. We lost Anton, who has always done the audit, and we lost John, who had done the financial, but we've still legally got to get the annual report out. So we're gonna have to re-strategize. Don, you have been a chairman for the audit committee. Would you write the audit chapter in the book, update it and write it for the annual report?
Last time I was involved with the annual report, I was on the record cursed and cussed out by the committee.
Well, we're not gonna
It-
curse or cuss you out.
It burned the bridge. No,
So you're refusing to help out on the annual?
on the annual report, yes.
So that means I'm the only one that's had experience with the annual report. Okay. Thank you for your cooperation.
There's a price to be paid for consequences, I should say.
All right, Don, thank you. All right, so, the financial part, I will work with Ariel on. The audit section, I'll work with Gia on. You've done some auditing. Okay, and, Brandon and I are already working on the facility master plan. So we'll have these three main chapters done. There's the fiscal, or the, forensic auditing and inspection or investigation. That's another chapter where we haven't done anything on in a year, so that'll be a single line item. That should be okay. So I will send you a link to it. I'll talk to you, read the chapter, and I'll get back to you. And we'll discuss what we have to do, okay, on it. And that is going to be our main concern right now. The other main concern for the year has got to be training. So everything else is going to be put off. Okay? Any other? So that's the main thing I have here. On the accounts payable checklist, I was going to go over the most recent ones for July and August. Let's table that till next time. Or postpone that till next time. And as far as the Board of Education accepting the independent audits. They accepted the audits on the 20th of September. I have a link here in the agenda, if you want to go see that from the meeting. And essentially what happened was that the staff brought forth several documents. They brought forth, remember, the cover letters from each of them. They brought forth the reports from each of them. We had a performance audit slide projection presentation. They brought that forth. They brought forth their presentation. They brought forth the questions and answers that we asked, and then our review. And these were all the additional documents that they presented with it. And essentially, the board did not say, yeah, we accept it. They just asked questions and they answered the questions, and that was it. But if you want to see what happens, and they did ask questions from our review that we had put in the review. So it's important that they're not ignoring what we're saying. We have an integrated part in this process, so we have to take advantage of it. Any questions? All right. Our next meeting will be held in December 11th. Now then, we're going to be electing officers. We're also going to be setting a calendar. And please, in the meantime, we usually pick the second Monday of the month. So look to see if you have any vacations coming up. If we have 3 people that have vacation, we'll change the date. And make sure that we're going to also check with the district calendar to make sure the staff will be here. And any other conflicts. Also, we'll be checking with the scheduling of the board meetings so that we don't have conflicts there. And I'll give you a tentative, if you have any problems with the second Monday of each month, send me an email on it, and then I'll get a tentative calendar and we'll vote on it next time. Any questions on that? Okay, now we do have training, further training. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll go on with some training.
If there are no objections.
If there are no objections, and I would like to adjourn now because the training does not have to be part of the meeting.
Okay.
Are there any objections for adjourning?
Yes,
Yes,
we got agenda items I'd like to make sure to put on next agenda.
I got your thing.
I want to make sure it goes on the record though, on that, because it hasn't been shared with anybody. I've submitted half a dozen resolutions to amend our bylaws. And I would also like to make sure that there's time placed on there for me to give a presentation about our bylaws at the soonest.
Now that you understand that the way this works is we have an executive committee meeting. that decides what is going to be on the agenda. This may not be on next month's agenda if we do not have room, but it will be considered, if not then, at a further one.
The resolutions themselves are a simple thing, which just, they're not read or anything, they're just referred to the bylaws committee.
Yes, I
So
know.
that's all takes about 30 seconds. Saying we don't have time would be difficult to explain.
So we'll explain it if we don't have time. We'll explain it to you. Any questions? Okay, let's take 10 minutes before we go into training the second.
So do we,
Oh, I'm sorry, we are adjourning. What time is it?
8:05.
Okay, thank you. Without objection. Okay, we'll be back at 8:15.
Do you want to say the next meeting date?
I say this on.
Because everyone's there.